time we met.
Come on, man. Let me check, man.
You know, I always ask that question just to be sure that we are together. But after the class, you took time to go through what we studied.
I think I. I think we talk more about quantitative and qualitative analysis. The research mixed method, which is sequentially explanatory, and we talk about quantitative survey, administer structural questioning to particular targets, where you mention about objective of the research. I want to know if I'm on the right phase.
Okay, maybe Akintude can help us. Olakemi. Smith, can you say something? Akinyemi Smith. Akinyemi, unmute now. We are not hearing you. Unmute your mic. Your mic is muted. Unmute your mic and then take off your video.
Can you hear me, ma?
Yes.
Okay. I've been saying something about quantitative and objectives of research.
No, what did we discuss the last time? The last time.
And I said that I'm on my way from work. I'm not yet at home, so to get to my notes. But I know we discussed about research, the objective of research.
Technique method. I think that is where we stop.
What?
Quantitative analysis.
We stop at yes, yes. That is the area where we stop, man.
We discussed extensively on qualitative. And I said that today we'll handle quantitative.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
talking
about
qualitative, in-depth interview.
Yeah, in-depth
but we extensively talked on qualitative.
Psychological that it gives the researcher insight to, aside from numerical analysis of, that is numerical analysis, it gives in-depth to the event. It allows us to have face-to-face conversation research, but you also talk about the advantage and disadvantage. One of the advantage is it gives the quality of the research, and also the disadvantage, it might waste time and resources. And you define the two, but you lay more emphasis on the qualitative. We also talked about, when we are doing the research, talking about the mixed method. that we should allow the area which we want to dwell more, who may be qualitative, to be like 80%, while quantitative will be like 20% of the research. So
I didn't give
more about
I didn't give you percentage.
sampling, gathering of data, and the method of gathering of data, which resulted into quantitative and qualitative analysis, which the third one is mixed research method. So those are the area we dwell more of. And you also talk about the approach to be deductive, and that is under quantitative. I don't know, and it is numerical. It is numerical, and the purpose is to measure, test, and also to quantify the variables, which qualitative is more of words, descriptions. The opinion of those who are doing research for their past experience is also very important in qualitative. Then I think understanding and explaining the meaning or the experience when making the research to explore. Yes, I remember that. So where we are talking about deductive in quantitative, we are talking about inductive in qualitative research theories from data. In quantitative, because you make the difference, and I remember I dwell with it after your class, and these are the little things I can just remember. Yes, quantitative, we also talk about surveys, questionnaires, and it can be with close-ended questions. Why the qualitative? Because it's more of a in-depth analysis, is more of an interviewing. That's what I meant by face-to-face. Then it helps to get focus to particular groups. Then more of observations through gesture, facial reactions, because the correspondent will have trust in you. That is why I said earlier that it's more of time taking and it's more costlier compared to quantitative that was already have a pattern or way of doing it. This is more and it helps in many of these interview and counseling. You get in case management one-on-one the interview document. So we can also say quantitative, the way you put it then, is the objective, and it may be generalized and to a larger population. If you understand that, sorry, I can put it in that way, then the qualitative is more of a in-depth, not always generalized. Not always generalized. It's can't say, okay, it's contextual. The word contextual, I think, is encapsulated what they mean by
Why is it not always
qualitative.
generalized? Why do you say so? What
It's
is
not
the
more,
reason? Hello,
it's
why is
not
the reason
always
for it?
generalized. But
Why is the
quantitative
reason now
can be
for it not being
generalized.
generalized?
I don't know. So I can say in a nutshell, you made mention of quantitative can be equals to quality equals to number, while qualitative is a quality equals to meaning or experience. Am I online?
It's okay. Please go back and go through your notes again so that you will internalize what we studied. So I just asked a simple question. Why is it difficult to make a generalization of our findings when we do qualitative, when we use qualitative approach alone? Probably not adding quantitative aspect of it, of approach to that particular study? Why is it
Yes,
difficult to make a generalization of our findings on a larger group? Why? What is the reason? The number one reason for that?
yes, you made mention of, in this case, it is individualistic approach. That is, what it is a one-on-one case approach in research. That is, what you have in A might be different from what you have in B. So that does not give us room to generalize uh, this approach in research. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. One major reason there is that when we use only qualitative approach, the number we use for qualitative is always small, which will be difficult for us to make a generalization of the findings. If you are carrying out a research, a study, where the number of participants is small, it's always difficult to make a generalization. Besides the fact that the data we collect is more or less subjective, because the individuals tell us what their own experience or what their experiences are from their individual perspective or their individual understanding. So, and I said that today we'll talk about quantitative. The last time we dealt so much on qualitative, where we talked about in-depth interview, we talked about focus group discussion and all that. So today we'll look at quantitative. And as usual, as I've always said, I said quantitative in our social work is geared towards understanding social phenomena through numerical data and statistical analysis. So the approach is beneficial. Quantitative research in social work is beneficial for evaluating interventions. I've said that before. Is beneficial for assessing service outcomes and at the same time informing policy decisions in a field where, in an area where measurable impact is essential. So by systematically gathering and analyzing data, we can identify patterns. As researchers, we can identify patterns, we can test theories, and we can as well provide evidence-based recommendation for practice. And you also remember that we talked about defining the research problem and formulating questions. So whether qualitative or quantitative, we'll make sure we define our research problem and then be able to formulate our questions. When that is done, we go forward to talk on conducting a thorough review to understand what is known, identify gaps, and refine our focus. After that, we'll go further to move. After forming our research questions in quantitative, can as well, formulate research hypothesis. So to identify social issues or problems, for example, a community experiencing high rates of depression, a community that is experiencing high rates of depression among low-income adults, may prompt research into the effectiveness of local mental health intervention. So in that case, we will conduct a preliminary literature review and consult with practitioners to understand the scope of the problem. So when we refine the problem into a specific question, the question should be easy to understand, and it must be narrow enough to be manageable. And this is supposed to be that because it will help us to address any issue of significance in social work. So developing hypothesis now. Can somebody just give me, a short definition of what you think hypothesis is? Hypothesis. Hypothesis. Can somebody define hypothesis for me? Because I believe I'm handling PhD students in social work,
Yes.
social work practice. So what do you
Yes.
think? Tell us what hypothesis is.
Hypothesis can be defined as a mixed method studies.
Come again, please.
I can say hypotheses are more related with numbers.
That is not true. Can another person make an attempt? I believe you are not hearing this word for the first time.
I can
say
I will say
hypothesis is
hypothesis is a proposed explanation for an observed phenomenon that can be tested through experimentation and further investigation, ma.
Yes, ma. In addition, we can say it's a testable statement that is used to predict the relationship between two or more variables. And it becomes from that research questions. That's why it generates hypotheses.
So
And
how many
we can use hypotheses in quantitative
types of
and qualitative. Under
hypotheses.
quantitative, it is tested using statistics tools. And under the qualitative, using hypotheses, you can
observation.
It's not really relevant, but it's a research is the question instead of using hypotheses in qualitative. And we have non-hypotheses and alternative hypotheses. Where is the area of non-hypothesis that predicts that there's no relationship or differences? So in the alternative hypothesis, which is identified by age, and this can predict that there is a relationship or difference. So hypothesis, as you said, is a statement, testable statement, and using the quantitative and qualitative is more useful in quantitative research questions. Thank you, ma'am.
It's all right. Listen to me. Listen, please. When you make a statement,
we can use
listen now. Listen.
Social demographic.
Listen.
Gender, school status.
Smith, listen.
Age, gender, school
oh my God. I can't hear me. Listen now. Listen.
Higher grades, as you taught us last time. And
hello, sir.
Age
Mr.
range between
Mr. Smith.
number age 1 to 10.
Mr. Smith.
10 10 to 20.
Mr. Smith. Mr.
Hello.
Smith.
So, hypothesis, not hypothesis. There is no end there. Hypothesis, as you earlier defined, is a testable statement. That is, you make a statement tentative. It's tentative. You just make the statement, and you're making a statement trying to predict the relationship between variables, that is independent and dependent variable, if you still remember your variables. And that we have two components of hypothesis. We have the null hypothesis, which we always represent with HO. That's capital letter H, then small o down.
Okay.
And that is the null hypothesis, which always will suggest that there is no relationship or there is no effect existing between the two variables you have stated, and you are trying to see the relationship that exists between them. Then we have the alternative hypothesis, and we normally represent that with capital letter H and then 1 down. And that predicts a specific effect. For instance, when you say there is no relationship between. Hello? Are you hearing me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
So I've mentioned the two components. So when we are stating our hypothesis will always be such that we will state it that there will be no effect or no relationship existing between the two variables, that is the independent and dependent variables. Then when we finish testing it with a statistical tool, if there is a relationship, we'll now take the alternative hypothesis, meaning that there is a prediction of a specific relationship existing between the two variables. So that's about hypothesis. For instance, let's make a statement now, null hypothesis. I want to put up a testable statement or a tentative statement. I could say there is no significant difference in depression scores between low-income adults who participate in the intervention and those who do not participate. So by the time we quantitatively collect the data and analyze, if there is a relationship or if there is a significant difference, we will drop the null hypothesis that states that there is no significant difference. We will not drop it and we will not restate it to say that there is a significant difference. Or we say the low-income adults who participate in the community mental health intervention, will have significantly lower depression scores compared to those who do not participate. So given the refined research question, the hypothesis directly addresses the expected impacts of the intervention on depression levels. So we now come to our main
Blink your eyes.
today.
Good.
So
open your mouth. Good.
So data collection, when we want to apply the quantitative research, most times relies heavily on standardized instruments and measures to ensure that the data gathered are consistent, to ensure that the data we gather are reliable and are valid. So these tools are essential for translating a complex social phenomenon into quantifiable variables, which in turn facilitate a rigorous statistical analysis and informed decision making. So the data collection instruments, what are they? Data collection instruments are structured tools. Structured tools, which of course they will normally use them questionnaire. Structured tools such as questionnaires. And then standardized tests, and also observation lists that allow researchers to capture information systematically. Then we now inside in that your tool, you are going to have a measure. That is why we normally say instruments and measures. So measures refer to the specific metrics or specific scales we use within these instruments, to assess variables like, take for instance, attitudes, behavior, or symptoms. So when you have a questionnaire, you ask yourself, when you're going to use a questionnaire, what will be my measures? What will be these metrics or the scales that I will use within this questionnaire to be able to assess the variables that you are working on? Variables such as attitudes, variables such as behavior or symptoms. So instruments and measures are used to operationalize abstract concepts. When you talk about attitude, you talk about behavior, they're abstract concepts. For example, mental health, social support, the abstract concepts. So you need to operationalize these concepts into when you are forming your questionnaire and coming up with measures that will, specific skills that will help you to assess these abstract concepts. And you put them into a tangible, quantifiable elements. So the common data collection instruments, I've mentioned them. The one we always call, the first thing that comes to mind is questionnaires, surveys and questionnaires. So for surveys, we have self-report surveys. In our social work research, self-report surveys are data that we collect, data collection tools where our participants or our respondents will provide information about themselves. That is the self-report surveys. They provide information about themselves, their behaviors, their experiences, their attitude or perceptions. And that will gather through the use of structured or semi-structured questionnaires. We use it so much because in social work research, it allows us researchers to gather first-hand information from our participants. It could be individuals or families or community regarding the social issues that we are studying. So the key features of these self-report surveys, these questionnaires, is that the individuals will always provide information about themselves without external observation, and we often use close-ended questions. We structured it in such a way that the questions will be close-ended questions. And then we'll always make sure that confidentiality is ensured, and that can encourage our participants to give their honest responses to sensitive issues. So we don't ask them to write their names, we don't ask them to put their address. So we try as much as possible to anonymize our instrument to the point that it will encourage our participants to give their honest responses on sensitive issues. When we use this standardized questionnaire, it helps us to ensure a uniform data collection across respondents. That is one good thing about standardized questionnaire administration. It encourages us, it helps us to have a uniform data collection across our respondents. Take, for instance, if we are to study domestic violence and family instability in Rumuaholo community in Rivers State, we develop a self-report survey. In this case, we'll be asking questions like close-ended questions such as, in the past 12 months, have you experienced any form of physical violence from a partner? And then our scale now will be yes or no. That's a close-ended question. Can also use the Likert scale question, where we will ask questions such as, to what extent do you feel safe at home? To what extent do you feel safe at home? In that case, the measure now will be like from 1 to 5. You give it number 1 will be not safe at all, to 5, which is very safe. So, but if it's an open-ended question, we can ask the question such as, can you describe how domestic violence has affected your family relationship? So it all depends on what you are, the measure that you want to use, the metrics, the scale you're using. So measuring the mental health, another example could be measuring the mental health of social work clients, or maybe evaluating the effectiveness of social work interventions. If we are carrying out a study, a social work agency implementing a rehabilitation program, because most of our studies will always handle the issue of evaluating the effectiveness of our social work interventions. So you could come up with a study that has to look at a social work agency implementing a rehabilitation program for substance abuse. In that case, you might use a pre-test and a post-test self-report survey. So before the intervention, you can ask a question such as, on the average, how many times a week do you consume alcohol or drugs? That is before the intervention. Then when the intervention has been instituted and you want to evaluate the effectiveness of that rehabilitation program for substance abuse, you will now come back again, that is after the intervention, to ask, how confident are you in your ability to avoid substance abuse? Because the intervention must have tried to rehabilitate them to the point that it's expected that they would have developed confidence to avoid substance abuse. So in that case, you can ask a question such as, how confident are you in your ability to avoid substance abuse, and you give the rating in the using the Likert scale, like 1, you know, say not confident at all, somehow confident, or very confident. You can rate it 1 to 3 or 1 to 5. So the advantage of this self-report survey is that it's always cost effective and it's easy to administer. We use paper, we can administer by having a hard copy questionnaire. We can also go online. And then it enables us to cover in a large sample. That is, we can collect data from many people, unlike qualitative approach. And then we use it for statistical analysis. It has its limitation. One of the major limitation of it is that you could have this respondents may give answers that they think are socially acceptable rather than giving us a truthful answer, because they know it's questionnaire and it's likely going to be given to different, that same questionnaire will be given to different people. And this is some persons, they will not want to give us true answer to the questions that are asked, because they think the answer they will give may not be socially acceptable. So respondents may give answers they think are socially acceptable rather than giving us the true, truthful response. And then people may forget or misrepresent past experiences. That's another problem we have with this quantitative self-report survey. So in a nutshell, these self-report surveys, they are valuable tools that we use in our social work research. But at the same time, they have to be designed carefully in order to minimize bias and achieve some level of a high level of accuracy and reliable data. Then we have the questionnaire. It must have when we now have our questionnaire, we don't just come up with questionnaire, or let me say standardized instrument, without validating it or without testing the reliability and the consistency of our questionnaire. So that takes us to the key features of a standardized instruments. Standardized instruments, they must have done the reliability of it. They must have done the validity of it. So in the aspect of reliability, they produce consistent results when used under the same condition over time. And then the reliability of it is that they ensure that what they are intended to measure are being measured, and that is validity. Examples of standardized instruments that we use in our social work practice. Remember that most of the things we do in our social work, we look at psychological aspect of our clients. So if someone is carrying out a psychological and health research, you might be thinking of using Beck depression inventory if you're working on measures of depression. We have a standardized instrument that we use that is very common, which we call the Beck depression inventory. We have a standardized instrument too, which we refer to GHQ, that is General Health Questionnaire, where you assess mental well-being of your client. We also have another standardized instrument we use in our social work research, which we call the PSS. When you want to measure stress level, we call it perceived stress scale, PSS, perceived stress scale, to measure stress level. So why I'm saying all this is that you know what you are going to come up with as your topic or your research title. And then you check if there are already standardized instruments that you can adopt and then modify to suit your work. The advantage of using a standardized instrument is that standardized instruments enhance the credibility and the comparability of research findings. Very key. And it saves us time. It saves us time because they do not require new validation. They have been validated. The reliability of it, that is the consistency of the instrument, has already been done. So you do not need to say, oh, you want to validate it again, or you want to test the reliability of it, because it has already been done. So it saves you time and allows for cross-study and cross-cultural comparison. So when we use standardized instruments, it improves the ability of the research. So however, they may not fully capture cultural and contextual details that we want. So in that case now, when you adopt a standardized instrument, you have to modify it to capture what you actually want to study.
No.
Some of you are not muted, and now you're causing a background noise. And that is why you're not hearing me well, or you're not understanding me. Mute your mics. I'm the only one speaking. When I don't want to speak and ask you questions, I will mute myself. So you cannot be on the road or in your house and you leave your mic on.
Sorry, ma'am.
Your mic is on, you pick all the background noise and you will not hear me, and others will also not hear me. Can I go on? Hello, can
Yes,
I
ma'am.
go on? Okay. So where you are not
Sorry,
using a standardized,
Sorry, man, you can go on, man.
okay, where you are not using a standardized instrument, it means that instrument you're going to use, that questionnaire, will definitely have a name, and you will be the one that will give it a name. If it is a standardized test, you will mention it and say it's a standardized instrument and the name it bears. But if it's not, and the questionnaire is entirely developed by you, you will also state self-developed questionnaire, and you mention the name. Most times the name is from the acronym. You have an acronym. And when you now do that, it will expose you to conducting validity and reliability of that your instrument. So the question now is, how do you validate your instrument? Validating an instrument is very key because we try to ensure that it accurately measures what it is expected to measure, what is supposed to measure. So it is intended to assess whatever we want it to assess. So you make sure that it is set, the questions are set in such a way that it will achieve the objective of it. So validating our instrument is a critical step to ensure that it accurately does what? Measure what it is supposed to, or what is intended to measure, what is intended to assess. And it involves a systematic process to ensure or to establish that the instrument is valid. And that takes us to different types of validity. We have the face validity of our instruments. In face validity, it refers to whether the instrument appears to measure what is supposed to measure at first glance. No, there are instruments you will see. By the time you look at the instrument and the objectives and research question of the study, the instrument will be saying some other thing different from the objective of your study. So from the beginning, the face validity of it is 0. Face validity is where the instrument will appear to measure what it's supposed to measure at first glance. And so that is where we normally take our questionnaire to our supervisor, which we call expert review. How do we do it? Expert review. So if you are a student, you will always be assigned a supervisor. And then when you get to your chapter 3, you develop your questionnaire. If you are not using a standardized questionnaire, a standardized tool, is the one that you formed yourself. So first validity there, how to assess the first validity is that you invite experts, expert review, where you invite subject matter experts. Of course, your supervisor will definitely be an expert in that area of your study. And there will also be other persons that are experts in that area, that is experienced practitioners, to review the instruments. You give your questionnaire to them, they review it, and then they give you feedback. There will always be a feedback, which you will ask them if the items you have submitted, items you have in your questionnaires, in that questionnaire you have given to them, seem relevant, and if they are clear, no ambiguity or whatever, and if they adequately cover the topic, you ask them such questions, and they will always give their feedback. If you are a student, your supervisor will always give the feedback. If you are not a student, you must have given your questionnaire to an experienced practitioner in that area. Say, for instance, now you are working on as a social worker, now you cannot develop a questionnaire and carry a questionnaire and go and give a historian. It's not an expert in that your subject matter. Then you have the content validity. The first one was face validity. Second one, content validity. As the name implies, is where you examine whether the instrument fully represents the domain of the construct. That is domain of the construct. You're not looking at literature review. You ensure that the instrument covers all dimensions of the concepts as discussed in the literature review. You would have done earlier. In that case, you need expert panels. You use panels to rate the relevance of each item. Then you have testing the construct validity. Construct validity is where you try to evaluate whether the instrument truly measures the theoretical construct is intended to assess. In that case, you're assessing it using a factor analysis. You use exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis to see if items group in a way that matches theoretical expectations. We have the criterion related validity. Criterion related validity is where you want to determine how well one measure predicts an outcome based on another established measures. After we have finished validating our instruments, we always go ahead again to evaluate the reliability of the instruments. You must have heard of reliability. And we say that reliability of an instrument is when an instrument consistently measures what it's supposed to measure. Consistently, that consistency is key. It's a key word when you are defining reliability. Consistently measure what it's supposed to measure. And there you have the internal consistency, which refers to the degree to which the items on your questionnaire measures the same construct. That is, if multiple items are intended to assess the same psychological or social attitude, their responses should be similar. And what do we normally use for reliability of evaluating the reliability of our instruments? The very, very, very common one that we use is the test-retest reliability approach. Test-retest reliability method. And test-retest reliability method, which we use to assess the stability and consistency of a measurement instrument over time. So it measures whether the same test or survey produces similar results when administered to the same group of people or two different, on two different occasions. Very simple example to give here is you have developed your questionnaire and you want to check the reliability of your questionnaire to ensure that it will consistently measure what it is supposed to measure. Of course, let's say you take 20 of it, 15 to 20 of this questionnaire. Look for a similar group that you are to study. And then you administer the questionnaire to them. When you administer the questionnaire, the first time, administer the test, and the first time you call it time one, that is one. So you, the researcher, you give the same test or questionnaire to a group of participants. And then you wait for a specific time interval. Most times we wait for like 2 weeks. So the time gap depends on the nature of the construct being measured. For example, a few days for mood assessments and several weeks for personality traits. Mood assessment can change. Once mood can change within few days. So if your study has to do with respondents' mood, in that case, you're carrying out a mood assessment. The time you're going to, the interval will be shorter. So the time gap will depend on the nature of what you are to measure. So if it's for mood assessment, the interval will be shorter. It will be for a few days. But if it is a personality traits, the specific time intervals will be longer. So after that, you come back to that same group of persons. You don't need to change them. In that case, now you are giving it time too. You re-administer the same questionnaire, like the same test. You don't change it. What you have given to them the first time you met them is what you will give again. And you are not supposed to tell them that you are coming back. Because if you tell them you are coming back, it will influence their responses. So you re-administer it with the same individuals, the same individuals that took the first test are the ones you go back again to give. And then you collect the questionnaire, and then you compare the two sets of scores, because you must have gotten a score in your first test when you administered the test for the first time, and then the second time maybe you gave an interval of 2 weeks or an interval of 5 days, depending on what you are measuring. And then you compare the two sets of scores. The correlation coefficient, which we normally use to make that testing it, is Pearson's correlation coefficient statistical tool, which we refer to ICC, is calculated. We calculate it to determine the relationship between the two sets of results. That is the one we commonly use. So the correlation coefficient typically will always range from 0 to 1. So where correlation, the interpretation is when you have less than 0 to 0.90, you now say it's an excellent reliability. When it is 0.80 to 0.89, you say it's a good reliability, and so forth. But if you finish and the test is giving you result that is saying 0.060, it's a poor reliability, meaning that it may need a revision. You need to go through your questionnaire again, because it's expected that what they answered in the first test should, if possible, be exactly what they are going to answer the second time you go to administer that same questionnaire. Even if it's not exactly, the difference shouldn't be so much that for it to look as if they are giving to two different sets of people. So it has its challenges. One of the major challenges in test-retest reliability is that participants may remember previous responses and repeat them instead of answering based on their current states. That is one major challenge you will have in test-retest reliability. There is this memory effect, because you are going back to them after a few days. So there is tendency that some of them may remember their previous response and repeat that same instead of answering based on their current states. And then some psychological or social constructs like the ones that have to do with stress, mood, fluctuates naturally, affecting test-retest consistency. I hope you know that stress or mood can fluctuate naturally. And so when that happens, it can affect test-retest consistency. And then if the time gap is too short, that is time interval selection. If it is too short, memory effect may occur. And then if it is too long, genuine changes in the construct may also occur. Then after test retest, there is this other one that is very common, which we normally call Cronbach alpha. I don't know if you've heard of it, Cronbach alpha. It's a common statistical measure that we use to assess the internal consistency, or that's measuring the reliability of psychometric instruments. So it indicates how well a set of test items measure the same underlying construct. So where you have a higher Cronbach alpha value, it suggests that the items within a scale are highly correlated and reliably, measure the intended concepts. These are statistical tools that we use in measuring. So the value of Cronbach alpha will always ranges from 0 and 1. Say for instance, you developed a social work stress scale with 10 items that you have designed to assess workplace stress among social workers. You know that after collecting the responses from the participants, you, the researcher, you do what you now calculate using the Cronbach alpha tool to find the consistency of it. And it's always 0.85, where you get something valuable than it is, it suggests that the reliability is not good enough. But where you have 0.85, it suggests good reliability, meaning that the scale consistently measures, workplace stress. So I don't know the one you must have used when you are running your first degree or your second degree. Have you heard of pilot testing? I want to know if you are
Pilot
with me.
testing,
Have you
yes.
heard of pilot testing or pilot study? Have you heard of pilot testing and refinement?
Refinement.
Answer and let me know that you're with me.
Yes, ma'am.
So pilot testing is also called a pilot study. This is a situation where, a small scale preliminary study is being conducted before the main research, just to test research
Yes.
instruments, just to test your instruments, to test your procedures and your data collection techniques. And we do that because it usually helps us to assess the visibility of our study design and at the same time help
Okay.
us to identify potential problems. When we do,
Issues.
yes, and one of the reason why we do that is that we try to do that to assess the clarity of our questionnaire items. When I mean clarity of our survey or questionnaire items, I mean, do our participants understand the questions? Do our participants understand the question? When you do pilot testing, you want to find out if the respondents actually understand the questions before you will go to print out more questionnaires that you are going to distribute. So you carry out a pilot testing.
Okay.
Are there problems with data collection methods? We are trying to identify technical or logistical issues, and then are the tools measuring what they intend to measure? Because at times you can develop the items, and when you go to carry out a pilot testing where you're going to give just very few persons to answer to the questionnaire, some may be asking you, I don't understand this one you have said. It means that there's some level of ambiguity, not very clear for for the participant to understand. So pilot testing is very, very important. Do your respondents provide quality data? You're trying to find out, are the questions too long or are they too complex for them to understand? So when that is done, then if the interviewers are involved, then are they conducting the study consistently? That's that case, you have to improve researchers' training. That is training data collectors. In this case, you ensure that all team members understand the protocol and are trained to minimize measurement errors. All these things are the things you carry out during your pilot testing, because you may not be the only
Testing.
one that will administer take for instance, you're carrying out a study where you have to use 300, 200, 300, 500 questionnaire. You can't do it all alone. It's not possible. You will need research assistance. So pilot testing is key.
Okay.
At that point now, when you train the data collectors on what to do, and then they also have to look at it and see that they understand the questionnaire, the items in the
What
questionnaire.
are the fairness?
Yeah, you said what?
What are other benefits of this study, ma'am?
You mean the pilot testing?
Oh yes, ma'am.
That's the benefit. Now, that is what I'm saying now. Why we do it?
Is to retest and retest so that we'll be able to get validity of the test.
Okay. Okay.
I've
Okay.
passed the validity and the reliability. I'm talking about pilot testing. Now you have done all the validity
That
and
is
this
okay.
thing. Then you now administer this thing. All the people that are going to help you to carry, that's where you need other data collectors, research assistants. They will also look at this thing and you want to find out whether they understood the questions there. And then the respondents, do the respondents understand the questions? Are there problems with your
Okay.
data collection method? The pilot testing is different from validity and reliability of instruments, but all
Okay, ma'am.
are geared to making sure that your instrument is okay for you to carry out your study. Both the research assistants, both the respondents, as many that are going to come in contact with this questionnaire should be able to understand it.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So, findings from the pilot test. Some questions may be unclear and need rewarding.
Okay.
Yes. So, if questions are not clear, you have to reward it. That is, restate again the statement so that it will be clear. And then participants may find the survey too long. Let me tell you, this question, the questions are too many and all that. Because some will not say, but you see the way they feel it, they will feel and leave some places, meaning that they were even tired of filling their question if it is too long. So in that case, you need to shorten it. Then some sensitive questions make respondents uncomfortable. There are some sensitive questions you will ask, it will make them uncomfortable that they will not answer it. So in that case, look for a way you will reward it again that even though the questions are sensitive, they'll be able to answer. So you, the researcher, in that case, you have to shorten and rephrase the questions. You are expected to add introductory notes explaining sensitive questions. Because when you notice that some sensitive questions are not answered, it means that you need to add an introductory note explaining sensitive questions. Then you reduce the survey time or length to ensure better response rates. And so that now takes us to what we call refinement. So the refinement now is the process of improving the research design based on the feedback. Because you are going to get feedbacks based on the feedbacks and the findings from the pilot testing. So the feedback now, the refinement now will now involve modifying the research tools, modifying the protocol or the methodologies, just to do what? To achieve effectiveness and what? Reliability. When you are finished, and then you can now say, fine, you can now take out your questionnaire to the field, take it to the field. When you have finished, you will collect all the questionnaire back, and then you come down to analyzing the questionnaire. And that is what we call data analysis in quantitative research. Data analysis in quantitative research. It's also a critical component of our quantitative work. That is where you are transforming raw numerical data into meaningful or meaningful insights. That's because they come out raw. You need to analyze them so that it can be meaningful. And with that, you can have an informed conclusion of what you have done. Use it for policy decisions and or whatnot, depending on what you have set out to do. And so it involves, it involves a systematic application of statistical techniques. That's where you have to analyze it, organize your data, analyze it, and interpret it. So it comes stage by stage. It's not done haphazardly.
Yes.
Yes, you design it in such a way to enhance the accuracy of your findings.
Of the data.
Yes. So before analysis begins, the data must be collected and prepared to ensure consistency and accuracy. So the first stage now will be the data collection. Am I correct? You collect the data, and then you are collecting the data with the use of a structured questionnaire. Then after you finish collecting, you do what we call data cleaning. Data cleaning.
Yes, ma'am.
Data cleaning is where you identify and handle missing values. You try to identify duplicate entries, identify inconsistencies in their answering, then checking for errors in data entry to prevent misleading results. So the ones that are not
Okay.
entered properly, you are dropping them, you're not using them. Where you have duplicated the entries, you don't take that and all that. Then before you now, that one is data cleaning. Then you now come to the stage of data coding. Some of you mentioned data coding. Coding now
Oh,
is
yes, ma'am.
where you convert the raw data into a structured format for analysis. And then you assign numbers, that is numerical codes, to categorical variables, just to facilitate your statistical processing. Then you now have to store the data securely. Remember, you have already promised that you are going to maintain confidentiality and all that. So you secure it properly in softwares where you are going to analyze, like SPSS, Excel, and all whatnot.
Yes.
Then you go ahead, before you conduct complex statistical tool, you have to have an initial exploration of the data, which is essential to understand the distribution and the characteristics. We use SPSS, that is very common to analyze.
Yes.
That gives you
That,
percentage, frequency, percentage, mean, standard deviation, and all that. Then where you now have hypothesis, the descriptive statistics. I know that somebody is taking you on statistics.
yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
So for that one, you know that when we talk about descriptive statistics, we are talking of measures of central tendency, measures of dispersions, and the frequency distribution. You know that. Then we have the inferential statistics and the hypothesis testing. When we talk of hypothesis testing, we are talking of using statistical tools such as t-test tool, chi-square test, ANOVA, and all the rest to determine significant differences, and then
Yes.
establishing confidence intervals and p-values to assess statistical significance. So when we finish all that data analysis, we'll now go to the one we call interpretation of the results and the findings. Interpretation of results and findings. That's where you are evaluating whether results are statistically significant, considering the effect size and the reward, relevance of your findings.
Sorry, ma. Interpretation of what, ma?
You said what?
Interpretation of what, ma? Sorry, ma.
No, I'm talking of, I said interpretation of results and findings.
Okay, ma. Okay, result
Mm.
and thank you, ma.
That is where, once we have done their statistical tests,
Yes.
that is, the findings must be carefully interpreted now to
Yes.
ensure that they align with your research objectives.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. In that case, now you are evaluating whether the results are statistically, significant.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
And you know that when we have, you know what I mean by data visualization.
Yes, ma'am.
Data visualization, where you're having the graphic representation, where you use tables, you use charts, you use graphs,
Yes,
bar
ma'am.
charts, line graphs, and all that, all to illustrate your findings,
Okay.
providing visual representation that highlights the key trends of your work. Mhm.
Okay, ma'am.
Then you finally come to drawing conclusion and making what? Recommendation. Because there must be conclusion and there must be what? Recommendation. So
Recommendation.
yes, the final stage involves deriving meanings, coming up with meaningful conclusion based on analyzed data and making recommendations. We are making recommendations, of course, for policy decision taking, making recommendation for practice, or you're making recommendation for future research.
Okay.
Mm. So I think we'll stop here so far. And ethical consideration in research now, you know that.
Yes.
When we say ethical consideration, you know what it is?
Yes.
Eh? I hope you know that ethical considerations are fundamentals. Ethical considerations are fundamental when you're carrying out a quantitative research to ensure the
Yes, ma'am.
protection of your participants. Am I correct?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. You are correct,
Uh-huh.
ma'am.
Yes, so. And our number one, anytime we mention ethical guidelines that will help us to prevent misconduct, safeguard our participants' rights, and maintain transparency in our research
Okay.
process. The number
Okay.
one thing we normally mention is what? Informed
Informed
consent.
consent.
Yes.
Yes. That is a
Of
situation where
blood.
you are saying that participation is voluntary. Am I correct?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Participation should be what? Voluntary. Don't coerce
Voluntary. Yes.
anybody. People are not coerced. People are not pressured to be part.
Participation.
Mhm.
Okay.
So you ensure that your
Then
participants
confidentiality.
ensure that they understand the study purpose, the purpose of your study. Ensure that they understand your procedures. Ensure that they understand the risks that are involved and the benefits. And then you must make sure you protect their personal data that you have collected from them and maintain participant anonymity, which we normally refer to as what? Confidentiality.
Okay.
Uh-huh. And then the second one is written or
Anonymity.
verbal consent. Written or verbal consent. In this case now, informed consent should be documented because there are cases where you really need to document this consent. So informed consent should be documented through written or verbal agreement before you begin to collect data from them.
Okay.
Special consideration should be given to vulnerable populations such as the minors, elderly individuals, or if they are children, you look for their parents or their guardians to get the consent because a child may not be able to consent to what you want, to your study. Anything you say, the child will be nodding his or her head and say, I agree with you. Please look for their parents so that you can get that consent. Then you also have to inform them that they have the right to withdraw.
Okay.
Yes, participants must be allowed to withdraw from the study at any stage without facing consequences. Tell them like that.
Okay.
Then privacy and confidentiality must be there. That is why we normally make sure that we don't take their personal identifiers such as names, address, contact details. You make sure you remove them from your coding. If they must be there, you code to protect privacy. Personal identifiers such as name, addresses, and contact details should be removed or coded to protect privacy. Coded to protect. Either you're removing it and where you need to put it, you code it to protect privacy. So in that case now, you use the unique identifiers instead of direct personal information. And then data should be securely stored. Should be securely what? Stored. Password protected files, please. to maintain confidential data handling. Then the very important one is avoid harm and ensure beneficence. So that your study should be designed to prevent any physical, psychological, or emotional harm to your participants. And you should assess potential risks and develop strategies to mitigate them. These are the things you have to do. No group should be unfairly treated or targeted. No group should be unfairly targeted or excluded from the study. Then when you finish, you provide what we call debriefing. So in case where deception is used, that is in cases where deception is used, for example, in experimental research, participants should be debriefed after the study. And so they should be allowed to ask questions and receive full disclosure of the research papers. All right?
Yes, ma'am.
Please, it's expected that you must be accurately report your findings. So avoid fabrication. Avoid falsification.
Fabrication.
And fabrication,
Okay.
that's where you begin to fabricate and add your own thing inside your findings. Avoid it. Avoid falsifying data. And then avoid
plagiarism.
It's not plagiarism. Plagiarism is different from what I'm saying. Plagiarism is when you quote other people's work without referencing them. I'm talking of a situation where you have collected your data and everything. You've gotten your findings. You begin to manipulate the findings. You are not honest. Be honest and transparent in reporting of your findings. Don't falsify figures. Don't fabricate. Don't come up with things that are not part of your findings. There should be no conflict of interest. Don't disclose conflict of interest.
Okay.
Avoid data should not be altered. Don't alter your data. Don't misinterpret, don't misrepresent your data. That is, avoid data manipulation. Then all sources of data, funding, collaboration should be appropriately credited. That is where we bring in plagiarism. Plagiarism should be strictly avoided in reporting results. So when you are reporting your results and you're quoting somebody, you're saying this is what this other your result is in line with, so you make sure you cite that author. Don't leave it hanging. So I think we'll end so far. If we are having another class, it will be, if we are having another class before your exam, we will do a revision of all that we have done.
Okay, ma. Okay,
all right.
That will be better, ma.
Okay, so our next class will be a total revision of what we have done in brief. But the revision will not be coming from me. I may be asking questions and I want you to answer. So before we have the next class, go through all that we have done. I do not, don't leave it for me as if I'm starting to teach again. You know what revision means?
Okay. Yes,
okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the time, ma.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ma.
Okay.
Bye. We really enjoy your lecture. Bye-bye, ma.
So at least this research has called back our memories of what we knew before.
Yes, ma.
Oh, yes, ma.
Yes, ma. Thank you, ma.
All right. Okay. Okay. So we end so far. Okay.
Yes, ma.
Thank you.
God bless you, ma. Bye-bye, ma.
Thank you.